Hi, we are Rachel and Sophie from Girls on the Ball.
I'm Susie Rack from The Guardian.
I'm Emma Sanders from BBC Sport.
And I'm Molly Hudson from The Times.
Excellent. I think we nailed that intro, guys. Well done. Nobody spoke over each other, so we're already doing well.
Okay, so we're here today to talk about social media and some of the abuse issues that have come up over the last few weeks, both from the sort of larger scale things like the racism that Lauren Jones received, sexism that Karen Carney received, but also at a more personal level and maybe actually just from fan to fan as well, that we've seen in more recent days, like after the Manchester derby. That kind of got a bit out of hand, I think. So just kind of covering all of that and putting on the personal side of it a bit.
Yeah, I think social media is probably a really important tool in the women's game. I mean, it's an important tool, I'm sure, in the men's game as well, but I feel like it's got an extra level of importance for the women's game, or at least it feels like that. Maybe that's because we kind of run our stuff from a social media perspective, but there's definite pros and cons to it. But I think we could probably all think of times where we've all been on the receiving end of not such nice stuff. I know we certainly can. I think we're pretty lucky that we haven't had to deal with it too often, but out of the two of us, I don't deal with it very well. So I can't imagine what it's like for like even you guys getting it more regularly, for players who probably get it on a daily basis. And I think it's that kind of the importance of talking about it and the importance of kind of reminding people that there's people at the end of these Twitter accounts and we're not going to get everything right all the time and we're going to have different opinions, and like that's okay. And maybe you guys can touch on some of the difficulties you've had. I know, Susie, you've touched on it recently with us about some of the stuff that you get.
Yeah, I mean, after I wrote the piece on Sean Massey-Ellis's like little incident with Sergio Aguero that really blew up, I got so much abuse from that, and I've just pulled up some of the examples. Shut the F up, he didn't touch anyone inappropriately, effing older woman making big deals about this, go get yourself a man, you divorced piece of shit, give your head a wobble, you stupid cow, stay home cooking, plug the iron in, love, like a whole list of things. And I mean, that's just from one article, and you get it from everything. I mean, obviously that was a particularly hot topic that attracted a lot of attention, but I wrote about Karen Carney and the abuse she was getting from Leeds fans, and I got loads myself, like real vile sexist stuff. I really like debate, and that's what makes me sad about it, is I love debating because it helps clarify what you think about things and test your ideas, and if you feel so strongly about something, arguing it is the best way to test if you're right. But when people start like chucking in like sexist language and swearing and generalized abuse, it like I've got quite a thick skin, I can take it, but it's the volume of it that's the problem, and how consistent it is for me that's the biggest issue. It's relentless. I think people forget that we're, as journalists, human as well, and we will make mistakes, and things won't always things we say and things we think you're not always going to agree with. We won't always be right. We make human errors too.
Yeah, it's when it gets personal as well. And I think I know from knowing you guys for so long, and the same with us, is that like we all love women's football. Like we genuinely are really passionate about it, and it's why we're all doing what we're doing. And not only is it kind of a job, but it's also something that we really enjoy. So there is an extra element of like it feels closer to home because it's something that we love and enjoy doing. So I guess when you get those kind of personal kind of attacks on things, and Molly, it's something you said to us earlier about the negative stuff always sticks out way more than the positive stuff. And I know you guys get loads of positive engagement because your stuff is great, but it's always those few negative comments that seem to stick with us. It's something you touched on, Molly. I thought was a really good point.
Yeah, and I think it is really difficult because, a bit like what Susie was saying, we all love debate, and we're all happy to speak to fans and people. The Times readers, for example, might not always know a great deal about women's football. They might say, only read my articles or only read our articles. They might not be regular viewers for years and years like we are. And, you know, we always try and engage with the commenters, because obviously it's a subscription, and, you know, it takes me like 5 minutes of my day to reply to someone, you know, asking an innocent question. But I think it's difficult when, you know, I know it's a similar thing for Susie, certainly. I'm not sure what it's like for the BBC with Em, but it's just the comments, and it's just constant. You know, I'm quite lucky. It's not usually directed at me. It's directed at women's football, but then inadvertently, it is directed at me, because it's like, why are you writing about this? Why is this so high on the website? Why are you paid to write about this? You know, women's football's worse than Sunday League standard. And it's no exaggeration to say that every single women's football piece I write probably has that in the comments. And when you think you're writing, you know, a piece nearly every day, sometimes when you're consistently reading that, it's just really draining and like depressing. Just to like, for me, it's like I have to prove women's football's worth in a way, and I don't need to do that. That's not my job. I'm busy enough doing a lot of other things. And I think, as I was kind of saying to you earlier, I think what we have to remember as journalists, and what maybe fans have to remember if they're sort of caught on the wrong end of it, and players too, is that if you read this abuse, yes, it's awful. Yes, you know, maybe there's 10 comments on an article, but how many thousands of people have read that article or watched that football match and thought it was great? Like, it's so much easier to put hate into the world than it is to just put the fact that, you know, you enjoyed an article or something. It's so much rarer to actually see and to read. So I think we just have to kind of, in a way, drown out the negativity and kind of remind ourselves that there is a lot of positivity. There are a lot of people, you know, us players, the whole community included, that really love women's football, and see it as a positive space and a place where we can have discussions and debates, and it doesn't turn into abuse. And I think we have to remember that. And as difficult as it is, last week, you know, the constant kind of nature of Twitter and the way it is at the moment, I just thought, I just don't want to engage. And then I thought, why would I do that? Why would I stop engaging with the fans that I genuinely have debate with and can ask questions about, because of a few people that are writing abuse? And that's the sad fact of it, that if it carries on, ultimately us as journalists, other fans, they won't be able to debate as much, and they certainly won't have that kind of relationship with players that they do at the moment. And that'll be really sad, because that's something, part of the job I enjoy doing, men's and women's football, is that in women's football we do have that debate, and we do kind of have that relationship with the players through social media.
Yeah, and I think, like, we know you guys really well, and we got particularly close during the last She Believes, and we had such a nice time out there, and we've continued that on through lockdown, and you've become a real kind of I don't know, really important kind of positive thing for me during lockdown. And we share a lot with each other, and we share a lot of like the work that we're doing and the things that we're really excited about, and we're often each other's sounding board. And I know how like excited you guys get about different pieces that you're doing and different things that are going out. And like, Emma, I don't know how that feels when you finally put something out that you're really excited about and you get like negative comments, or you get abuse.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm perhaps coming at it from a different point of view, because I obviously do a lot of work in men's football as well. So a lot of, I feel bad saying audience on Twitter, but I guess a lot of the people who follow me for my men's football. So when I do put out women's football stuff, it is met with an audience of largely men's football. So I actually find that that is quite challenging for me as well. And I guess, you know, we're talking about how we're all passionate about women's football. Something that I particularly notice is that obviously I do a lot of live text on the BBC website, a lot of Premier League live text. And that is obviously, you know, we get people texting in constantly on the BBC football hashtag. And the hardest thing about that job, which I found, which I've now sort of, you know, I'm 3 years into the job now, I'm a little bit more used to it, but you have to have that open and you have to monitor it, because it's part of the live text experience. So when people, especially when I first started and my name was perhaps a bit more unfamiliar on the live text, people would be tweeting in so many sexist comments, and I had to read it. I had to sit there and look at it and read it as part of my live text job. I found that really difficult, and I actually tweeted some of the abuse that I had, I think, earlier during lockdown. It was sort of in the past year. I know all of you girls were really supportive of me during that time, but there was one guy in particular who just one evening just kind of went to town on me just because I was a girl, really. And like, it's, you know, you guys know me, I'm like, I think I try and put on a bit of a hard front, but I am like really sensitive. So I really struggle with that kind of thing, because I think I try to be really friendly and really chatty. So those comments probably hit me more than they should. But I think when I get them for women's football, it's probably 10 times worse, because I feel like I'm used to kind of the men's football world where it's a very wide world, whereas I feel like the women's football community is so much closer and so much more intimate, that actually the comments on women's football stuff probably hits me a lot harder, because I perhaps am a bit more familiar with the person behind the keyboard. If that makes sense. I might not necessarily know them, but I've seen them comment or I've seen them like things before. So you kind of feel like you've had some form of engagement with them. It's not just a bot that's come onto the Premier League live text. It's actually a women's football fan who, you know, has read your stuff. So I think if I see comments from those kind of people or those accounts, I think it does hit me more. And you're right. I think when you get so excited to put out a piece of work, especially for me, because you guys know that I do it well. I used to do certainly a lot more women's football stuff more in my free time, just because I was genuinely passionate about it. I'm very lucky that I've got more opportunity now sort of within my working hours, but it's still a luxury for me really to be able to work on sort of, you know, bigger women's football projects. And I do have that excitement. And, you know, I remember I did a fans piece recently, and it was just a positive piece on like the growth of women's football fans, and it just ended up, you know, having other supporters groups sort of attacking each other, and I was getting a lot of abuse for it, saying, oh, our fan base wasn't like this originally. And I sort of had to explain, saying, look, I literally just spoke to a couple of people and this was just their opinions, and it's just celebrating fans. There wasn't really much more to it. So it is, I do find it much harder with women's football for that reason, because I just feel like the sense of community is a lot closer.
Yeah, for me it's that personal side. I mean, we're very lucky, but I mean, the nature of our social media accounts is that it's quite it's homegrown. I mean, we've built it up over the last 9 years, and you do feel like you know a lot of people within the community. We've been there from when there weren't that many to where there are now quite a lot of people. So you know, you've seen that progression and the growth of the game, and you've gone on that journey with everyone who's followed you along the way, and then new followers as well. And then when you go through something like, say, what we had at Christmas when we dared to put out our half team of the year, you know, as people have been to see a lot of the games, and we chose our top 11, and there's just a constant, it took about 3 hours, you know, of our time in the evening of us just reading these comments after comments after comments. And yes, there was a lot of people came in and backed us up, and it's lovely to see that. But at the same time, it's still 3 hours of our time where we just got like abuse from people for having an opinion about, you know, it's not something not very inflammatory at all, to be honest. It's that lack of discussion, I think.
I love that debate. Like, I'd love to have that kind of, you know, oh, well, what about this player, like she's done XYZ, and you're, oh, that's a really good point, and like love that kind of interaction, that kind of debate. And that's what we want. You want to foster that conversation. I mean, that one stands out for me because it's the most recent, but also, you know, it was a difficult time of year. It was Christmas. We were going through lockdown, and maybe a bit like you, Emma, I put on a bit of a front, but actually out of the two of us, I struggled the most with that level of abuse we got through. And I was also, it was the night we were doing our kind of virtual Christmas dinner with my family at home in Ireland, because I wasn't going home at Christmas. And like, I was so distracted and so kind of checking my phone, and like kind of, you know, I mean, I was pretty happy getting to spend time with my family, but still also like had that in the back of my mind, that I was like, oh God, like what are people saying now? Like, what have we done? You know, and we were quite excited we'd done our day of work, and we were excited to kind of share our team. We'd put a lot of thought into it. So I guess it's just that kind of reminder that like there are actually people at the end of it, and like you don't know what they're going through. And I think if COVID's done anything, it's that reminder that you just don't know what's going on for people in their life. And even if they are like the most annoying person ever on social media, it doesn't mean you have to be cruel back to them. And it's, I guess it's an easy thing to do, to fire off a tweet.
But I think that's why we put out that thing on Friday, whenever it was, Saturday, about being kind to each other. It wasn't actually, it was sparked by what happened after the derby, and it maybe could have seemed to be being aimed at a particular group of people, but it wasn't, because it's been growing and growing. That kind of discourse of abuse has been growing across the game, and it just struck us as something that, really shouldn't be happening when we're having debates with each other. Yes, you can be on different sides, you can wear different shirts, but it doesn't have to come down to being hateful towards each other.
I think something interesting that you all kind of touched on was the kind of stuff we deal with as women when talking about men's football, and the extra kind of level you have to go to when you're promoting women's football. And it made me think, like, that's one thing all of us have in common, like regardless of who you support or what fan group you might be from or what player you love, all of us love women's football, and we have enough to be dealing with to have to talk to the sexist misogynists who think women should be in the kitchen. And actually, if we unite against that kind of rubbish, we could actually have a real impact. And rather than kind of, let's have rivalry and let's have like debate about players and who's the best 11 and who played well or didn't play well, like that's obviously welcome. We want that kind of passion in the game. But when it comes to the kind of having to deal with the negative side of things, we have enough of that trying to promote women's football in general. Like there's no point kind of adding that extra layer of it within women's football, I guess, would be my one key takeaway from it. But there are pros to social media in the women's game. It makes it hugely accessible, and that's probably one of the biggest selling points of women's football is its accessibility. I don't know, Susie, if you want to come in on that, but like that's a massive thing for kind of growing the fan base and the communities.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think the very, very fact that that social media sort of, the growth of social media coincides with the growth of women's football is no coincidence, right? Like it's the fact that players have been able to reach out to people and engage with people that I think has helped grow the fan base quite a lot. And that's really, really great. It makes it easier for us as journalists, particularly as the game has been sort of in its infancy and more amateur, to be able to reach out to players, arrange interviews, catch press officers, because they're not hidden like they are in the men's game behind, a PR assistant doing the tweets for them or anything like that. They are genuinely there and engaging. You can DM them because they've not got 50,000 DMs from fans going, why haven't you signed whatever player yet, or whatever it may be. So that's like a huge plus. The fear is that we might eventually lose that as the game grows and grows, but at the moment it's hugely satisfying that we can have that kind of relationship with players, and that players do reply to tweets and will watch a little video of a kid doing kick-ups in a garden and send them a shirt as a result of it. You get that a little bit on the men's side, but it's much more PR-y, and it's usually second or third hand that the player hears about it rather than them directly seeing it. Whereas in the women's side, it is them, it is Jill Scott sitting there going, oh, that's cool, I'm gonna whip off some boots to that little 7-year-old girl in her garden. That's great. That, like, you can't fault social media for that side of things.
Sorry. he's very important. He's very insistent on getting up. And that's really true. And I think the other kind of aspect of it, Molly, I don't know if you want to come in on this, but we talk a lot about role models in women's sport and like young girls and boys having access to more role models, and social media kind of lends itself to that a little bit. It kind of gives people more access to players and to see what they're like.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes back to what Susie was saying about how you can DM a player and they won't have so many people asking them all of this stuff, but also they won't have abuse. Like until fairly recently, people that watch women's football, they were kind of fans that had, kind of like what you were saying, they're growing the game. We all had a part in the development of the great game, and we've all watched it grow, and therefore have all, really loved the players. And I think Tony Duggan said it while she was playing in Spain, the fact that she really enjoyed the fact that fans now did criticise players, and things like that. But it's just about keeping to the right side of that line, because we want that, and we want a professional game, and we have that now. And it's amazing to see actually that these role models, people like Jill Scott, who Sue's mentioned there, that, you know, started off as part-time and are now an incredible role model that has, you know, reaped the rewards, I suppose, of what she's deserved for all of these years. We don't want the bad stuff to come and ruin that. And it is difficult. And I understand that some people watching this might say, well, if you're a professional player and you're a footballer, then you should expect this. But in my opinion, just because it's in men's football doesn't mean we have to accept it. And I think if you speak to men's footballers, they hate all of this as much as we do, as much as, you know, the large majority of fans do. And we don't have to replicate, we don't have to copycat everything that they've done. And I think, you know, we don't always agree with the FA, but I remember Baroness Sue Campbell said something a little while ago when she was asked about this, and she said we shouldn't try and mirror the men's games. There's part of the women's game that's unique, and it's the unique selling point of the game, and it's the accessibility and that family nature, and we don't want to lose that. And I think that's sort of maybe why we're here talking about it, why it's been such a bigger thing on social media, that we are getting to that point now where there are more fans coming in, there's more people watching it, social media itself is growing, the following of these players is growing. But how do you stop the kind of bad side growing too, I guess?
It's that, as you say, it's that kind of line between criticism, which is and constructive criticism, or saying someone didn't do great. You know, there's that line, but then there's a very distinct line between being abusive with that. And I think by now most of us should all know where that line is. I mean, it's sometimes hard, but really there is a very big difference between abusing someone and criticism, and, you know, constructive criticism or being critical of the game or whatever. It's a very different nature of the way that you go about things.
And the litmus test should be, would you say this to someone's face? Like, I mean, it's probably a lot easier to turn to someone and say, you weren't tracking back enough, like you weren't doing enough to cover whatever player, like you missed that clearance. You can, you know, that you're not afraid to say that kind of thing. If you're going to turn to someone and be like personally abusive towards them, if you wouldn't say it in front of their face, you know, don't say it on social media. And just one thing you touched on, Molly, that not just in football, but I think in society, we so have to move away from men's things being the baseline for if something's good. Like, why that's always kind of our the thing that we compare it to. Is it the same as the men's? Oh, well, then it's okay. Like, we so need to move away from that kind of frame of mind, and the two things can stand together, and this can be good in its own right, and this can be good in its own right. They don't have to mirror each other. And I mean, maybe this is a difficult question to give to you, Emma, but I wonder, like, have we gotten to a point where we take the access we have in women's football for granted?
Yeah, I think so. I absolutely think so. And I've actually said this to some fans, because I guess I probably came into the women's game later than all of you, maybe around a similar time to Molly, just given our ages. But because of my background with men's football, I was like absolutely blown away at how like good the access was in women's football. And I perhaps was a little bit not critical, but I kind of used to see it as more of a negative, where I would say, oh, yeah, you know, if I wanted an interview, I could just get an interview. That's how, you know, desperate clubs are for media attention. And that was kind of how I saw it, because I was coming in from, you know, basically, you know, if I wanted to speak to Jordan Henderson at Liverpool, I couldn't just drop the press officer an email. Like, you have to form a relationship, and there's very few people who would get a sit-down interview with the captain of Liverpool Football Club. So on the men's side, so I kind of was like so taken aback by that, and thought, oh, that shows how far the women's game needs to go, that, you know, they kind of need the media so much that they, you know, I was essentially getting offered interviews. So not that, like, yeah, I think that's like, I hope I've described that well, but it certainly wasn't a negative. I think it just highlighted, you know, the growth that needed to be done in the women's game. From somebody who was coming from the men's side, I was just so taken aback by it. But I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and for that reason I felt so involved within the game and felt so passionate about it, because I got to know individuals personally. And I do think people have taken that for granted, and I think even fans that are coming across from the men's side now are perhaps taking that for granted, because I think there's perhaps some fans, you know, and I probably myself as a fan originally before a writer probably felt entitled after a point, because if you're used to going to every game and getting selfies or pictures or, you know, autographs, whatever it might be, and having conversations with players, if one week you didn't get that, or, you know, if a player didn't respond to you on social media, then I don't know, I feel like there's almost now a feeling of entitlement that because you've known them from the beginning, they should respond, or they should still do pictures and whatever. But I think there has to be a mutual understanding that as the game grows, the players' responsibilities outside of the game are going to grow as well. So they're going to have more, you know, things to do in the media. They're going to have to do more in terms of, you know, their sponsors. They're going to have to do more within the club as well. So in terms of charity work and community work and foundation work and all that kind of stuff, which perhaps they didn't used to have to do, because for one, they were part-time, so it wasn't within their contract. Two, there wasn't the same kind of media attention or the same need for sponsors and things like that. So I think as the game grows, the players' responsibility grows outside of it, and therefore they are going to have less time for engagement with fans and with media. I'm sure it is already becoming more competitive for us.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something that we have to accept. But I think Molly's made a very good point that, you know, we don't have to go as far as the men's game, and hopefully we can keep some form of that, you know, engagement. And what I've really enjoyed seeing, just as an example, is Chelsea Women's Supporters Club have a very, very good relationship with Chelsea as a football club, and I know that they as a kind of a fan base through that supporters club get to kind of have a lot of engagement with the players. So I'd like to see that kind of thing continue. It probably just has to be set up a little bit more professionally and perhaps done less frequently. But I think as long as you have things in place to ensure that there is kind of a constant engagement between fan bases and supporters clubs in particular, and obviously the women's teams, then I think we can still keep elements of it, but our expectations need to be lowered.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think we'll come on to that a bit later into some of the questions we've had sent through. But I do wonder, as the game, you know, becomes more professional, and if abuse kind of continues on things like social media, will we see clubs take more steps to protect their players and to kind of reduce that access? And Susie, it's something you touched on earlier when you were talking about an interview you did recently, about, you may think it's just you sending a tweet, but actually there could be 10, 15, 20 other people doing it as well. And that could actually have a wider impact on what makes the game so great, which is its accessibility.
It's no accident that if a player is particularly under the cosh, that they will become a little bit harder for us to talk to as journalists. Yeah. And that's bad for fans as well. It's not even necessarily that their direct access will be cut off, and that fans might delete that players might delete their Twitter accounts. So yeah, I think we are going to see clubs take action to protect players. They already do. You know, there will be a big player that we want to speak to that we can't get access to, and it won't be explicit. It will be just, oh, they're unavailable, they're busy, or they can't talk right now, or whatever. You know, there'll be some excuse, but underpinning it is something that's happened that means that you're not getting the access.
I think the other point as well, building on that, is like the context of the women's game. As you say, a lot of these players have built it up from the very start. You know, they've given all of everything they have to be able to play professional football. And I think it was something that came up the other day. We saw a social media post about Alex Greenwood, you know, playing for 4 different clubs, and you know, it just sort of encourages that sort of pile on players without understanding the context of why she's played at those 4 different clubs. And you know, it's not the men's game. It's different. It's very different why players go to play for different clubs, and those rivalries aren't the same. You know, so kind of, I think we need to have that understanding of the context of women's football and where we're at when nowhere near the end point. We're still quite young as a sport, but it's been much younger, and
We are too.
yeah. But I mean, maybe because you see it on the men's side as well, Molly and Emma, about that kind of understanding of the different contexts that we live in within women's football, and how we, I think, have a responsibility as journalists maybe as well to actually still push that as well. The fact that things are very different. It's not like someone's signed a 6-figure a week, salary with a house, and all of their family have come to stay with them,
or a 5-year deal.
Yeah, or a 5 deal.
Yeah.
It's very, very different.
Yeah, I think particularly, I suppose, what you were saying about Alex Greenwood, that for listeners that might not know, if you're like a top level women's footballer, like professional player, realistically, you want to be winning the Champions League, or you want to be competing with that. You probably don't have enough money, or like the top, 2% or something might be able to go abroad and play for a Lyon or a Wolfsburg to try and get that goal elsewhere. But there aren't like 6-7 teams that you can play for like you can in the Premier League. And particularly for Alex Greenwood, like Everton and Liverpool, and Sanders will know this from obviously being a Liverpool fan, like near enough every player that's played for flipping Liverpool has played for Everton. Yeah. Because, like, firstly, it was handy if you were a northerner, you didn't have to travel far, and they were two of the leading teams. And maybe you didn't think that it was a big rivalry, or it certainly wasn't as big in the women's game, even if you were, say, a Liverpool fan. We know players that play for Arsenal and are Chelsea fans, and vice versa. And you don't have the luxury to choose where you want to play in regards to your men's team affiliation. Actually, for so long, it was what pays the bills, what's near me, what can I afford to get to. Maybe your partner works, in a certain area. You don't have enough money, you don't have a big enough salary to just go to a different side of the country, buy a house, buy a car, do all of these things. And I asked Joe Montemurro about this the other day, the Arsenal manager, about the increase in players coming from abroad, and particularly like the players that have come from Australia, for example, that you not necessarily can just come over here, buy a house, buy a car, bring your whole family over. It kind of doesn't work like that. And for a lot of years, that was because you weren't too sure about the kind of long-term futures of these clubs. We've seen clubs fold almost overnight. Yeah. So I think it's an area of the game that's developing, and it's another case of not judging, because, for example, the Australian players, Montemurro was saying, have taken a little while just to acclimatise to European football and
weather
and the weather and and the style of play and everything like that. And it's not like the men's game where they come with like a 70 million price tag and immediately must stand on English soil and be the best footballer in the league. It doesn't work like that, and it's not going to work like that in the near future. Mm-hmm. And I guess the other thing I just want to add was what Suze was saying about the men's game, I suppose, and the access in the women's game. For me, I've been working in the women's game regularly since 2018, and the access has changed massively. There was a time, as Sanders said, you could just DM a player, or not even that, maybe you had a player's number or whatever, you just speak to them, set up an interview, no problem. Now you can't just email a club and ask for a player and ask to do what you want with them. If you can do that, it'll probably take months to organise, and that's not an exaggeration. No. Of the recent interviews I've done that I'm really happy with and were really positive, lovely things, have literally taken months to organise. And I sometimes read the comments on Twitter, and this isn't abuse, this is just genuinely fans asking the question, can you speak to so-and-so, can you write about this, can you write about that? But actually don't always understand the amount of hoops we have to jump through for something that's so simple. And that's something that me and Sanders have experienced in the men's game, but in the women's game, Like it doesn't matter that you might think, well, you know, it can't be that hard, it's women's football. It is, because a lot of the people that work in women's football now work in men's football and treat the media in the same way that they do the men's football. And for me, that's something that we have to be really careful of, and fans have to be really careful of. Men's journalists don't really talk to fans that much because of the amount of abuse they get. And sometimes, yes, that's maybe kind of self-inflicted in some of the coverage that goes on, particularly maybe in the tabloids or whatever. But it's certainly in women's football, we aren't the enemy. We're all people that really love the women's game and are pushing it forward. And, you know, 9 out of 10 things we do will be super, super positive. And the one we don't, you know, it might be an analysis piece or something like that, where, yes, it's criticism, but it's just part of our job. And I think we have to be really careful that, yeah, we don't kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't go, you know, this media is going to ruin the game or whatever, because it isn't. And actually, it's still a really important developmental phase where we need the media and we need to hear the stories about these players. And it's so, so crucial for the fans to get that access through us, because as one of you pretty sure said a minute ago, you might not be able to get that now. When there's, you know, 10,000 fans in a stadium, you might not be able to chat to that player about how their weekend's been or what things they enjoy doing in their spare time. But as the media, as interviewers, we have the opportunity to ask those questions for you. And I think it's really frustrating when that door is closed on us. So maybe that is going slightly off a tangent, but I think it's related to the kind of the whole developmental phase of the game that we're currently in.
Yeah, it is. And I think we're really lucky actually that like 99% of the journalists that are working in women's football are already passionate about the women's game, which is really lovely, because you know, when people are doing things, whoever they might be, and they might be your competitors, you know, they're doing it because they really want to do it, and they really like the game and they want to grow the game. So that's something that's quite unique, which I think is really nice, and we probably want to hold on to. And you touch on like the lengths we go to sometimes to get those interviews and to get the things done that you want to get done, and then you can end up being an idiot like me and not pressing record on some of those interviews and just like wanting to die. And so like there's those like other elements that go into these things, and you would think COVID would make these kind of things actually slightly easier to organize some of the access, but actually it still can be quite tricky. But anyway, I digress. I thought it might be a good time to touch on some of the questions we've had in from people. So we've just picked a couple, and I think we've probably touched on this a little bit, but we can probably go into a bit more detail. And I feel like, Emma, I'm picking on you with like tough questions, but I'm not. Courtney McKenzie has tweeted and said, do you think clubs should take more responsibility for how their fan bases treat other players?
It's an interesting question. I don't think it's the club's jobs to do that. I think the clubs can advise their supporters groups, as they do in the men's game, as they do in all sports, I think. But I think there has to be a collective responsibility among fans to, as we've, you know, discussed already, is to just educate themselves on what is abuse, what is acceptable, what is criticism, and what's debate. I don't think it's the club's responsibility to do that. So no, I don't think they should. I think obviously have guidance, obviously have, you know, things in place where racism is completely unacceptable and there needs to be punishment for that. So if there are fans within, obviously at the moment there aren't fans within stadiums, but when fans do return, I want to see clubs obviously punish fans who are abusive or racist towards players, and I want to see that you know, happen very regularly, and it needs to happen more in the men's game as well. I think that's just a given. But in terms of social media activity, the fans should know. You know, they don't need a club to tell them that's unacceptable. You should know what's acceptable and what isn't. So yeah, I would say no on that.
But I part of me does wonder sometimes that in the official sort of supporters groups, whether there is more that needs to be done, just to not even like, not to get rid of it, but like just to educate people about behavior towards the players, towards other people, and whether that's kind of got lost a bit, or whether, because you see it in the men's game as well, people get a bit out of control, and whether there is a sort of responsibility. I don't know whose responsibility it is, to be honest, but to sort of try and rein things in, and yeah.
Do you think that will come with when because I was very interested in this when I wrote that fans piece about the kind of the official and unofficial line between some supporters clubs and some that have chosen not to become unofficial. I think that's where it gets interesting for me, because I think if you're officially affiliated with the club, then that's when I think there has to be a level of professionalism there, and there is obviously a committee in place. And I do think I would agree with you in that sense, and so where I think then you work alongside the clubs to have guidelines, to have kind of just I guess a moral high ground that you would follow if you are to be a part of that supports club, because you're essentially representing them as a group of people, and as a group of people they are representing the club.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's difficult at the moment is that there are obviously supports clubs and supports fan bases out there in women's football that aren't officially affiliated with clubs, and I think that's where they obviously have more of a license to use their own voice, and rightly so, they've chosen to not be officially affiliated. But that's where I think it becomes a bit murky, because it's then difficult for them to essentially work alongside the club, because if they're not actually officially affiliated with them, then they're not official representatives, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Susie, you very politely raised your hand, but I was going to say very quickly, since starting way back, thinking back when we started covering the women's game, like how cool it is to actually have fan groups for clubs, like actual fan accounts is so cool. Anyway, sorry, you've done the Zoom etiquette and raised your hand.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to agree. Like, I think it's not for clubs to publicly admonish individual fans, but just to add that they, like, as well as, you know, doing the nice anti-racism videos and things like that, they can set the standard, can't they? Like, in the way they conduct themselves on social media. I think they could do a bit more to, in the same way that they do the anti-racism videos, to like guide fans the right way and promote good social media usage and good interaction, and point out what is good interaction and bad interaction. But I think it'd be very difficult for to hold clubs responsible for fans, because in all circumstances you're going to get rogue fans crossing lines and doing things and saying things that they shouldn't be, no matter how much you tell them it's wrong and guide them in the right direction, because a lot of them do it for laughs, basically. And engagement and just people like pissing people off online, and it's really, really hard to clamp down on. I think it'd be unfair to hold clubs accountable for that, but I also do think they could do more to more generally like set that standard.
Yeah.
I think it's really difficult, because for me, a lot of the stuff that goes on social media, and actually the same stuff that we hate in the men's game that is chanted in stadiums that we're trying to eradicate, actually comes down fundamentally to being a good human being. Like, do fans really need a club to tell you to be a nice person online, not to send abuse? If you as a human being need to be told not to send abuse to someone, then yeah, maybe you've got bigger problems, you know. I think, so I would agree. I don't think it should be down to clubs. I think, God, we have to just take accountability and like be adults and be responsible and not be idiots. I don't know, I just feel like I'm preaching to the converted here, but like it doesn't seem that hard to me. Like, never in my life would I consider sending something that could be abusive to another person, and I don't really understand why that's acceptable online or why it's acceptable in football stadiums, but we have to somehow make it clearer that it's not acceptable, it's not cool. And like Sue said, it's not about getting likes or like retweets. Even if you're sharing or liking something like that, then you are part of the problem. Stop doing that.
And I think, like, I mean, in an ideal world, we would hope that people just know what the difference is, but that's not always the case. And I think oftentimes social media reflects society, but on a much more magnified scale, because there's just so much less accountability for what you do and say on the platform. Which leads me into a good next question from Michael Scota. He asked a few, but I've picked one. Does the good outweigh the bad when it comes to social media?
I would say yes, because as Susie said before, I think the correlation between the growth of social media and the growth of the game is, I think that's a really good point, and I completely agree with that. I also think the engagement between journalists and fans, between players and fans, has grown because of social media as well. I think, just information is easier to pass on because of social media. And I found this actually by talking to a couple of the supporters clubs who used to say they found it really difficult just to kind of provide fans with information on things like kickoff times or TV channels and things like that. Whereas now you can kind of sum that up in a tweet. You guys do it every weekend. You list the fixtures, the kickoff times, where you can watch them, and just like small things like that. I know how much people appreciate that, because it's just so handy to have that information readily there and available on a platform like Twitter, for example, which I think is probably the best place to get quick, snappy information. And then we've also seen the growth of like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but I think I think that's a good way of showing another side of the players and another side of the of women's football that you don't necessarily see. So I do think the good outweighs the bad, and I do think it is such a good way to keep up that engagement, and obviously market the game as well. But yeah, unfortunately, as there is within the men's game as well, is that there's just this side of social media where it is just too toxic, and there has to be a line. And I think we've all felt it at some point. I had a period where it was probably about 2 months where pretty much every 3 or 4 days I was like, bye Twitter, I'm taking a few days off, because I was having mental breakdowns every time I was going on it, because I just couldn't take the negativity. So not actually having mental breakdowns. Yeah, so I think to answer the question, the good outweighs the bad, but I think we just need to be aware that the bad is probably growing a bit more than we would like.
Yeah, that's true. I totally get that as well, because like in the industry I work in, like my day job is pretty much quite negative stuff on social media. So then to come off that and go on to do something that I really love, which is women's football, and then see the negativity, it does make you kind of want to say bye Twitter for a few days. But this is an interesting one, maybe a bit of a controversial one, Susie. Did Dubai's make it worse, or was it do you think it might have been a bit of a tipping point, in that many fans and journalists are kind of united in their outrage and we're speaking out about the whole situation, and perhaps there's a bit of a hangover where people kind of feel like a bit more emboldened now to say just how angry they are about everything?
I don't know about the hangover part. I think it was happening anyway, but I do think it was a tipping point. I felt it as a tipping point. Like we're all having to give up so much in lockdown, and you've got these players that we're very, very used to associating with our circumstances a bit more directly than you say you would with the players in the men's game. These like as we said earlier, players that have done so much just to have the right to play the game, and have given up so much, and are used to sacrifice, and are really engaged with their fan base. And then you've got a whole group of them flying off to Dubai in the middle of a pandemic, when they are in a hugely privileged position of being able to do their job in their workplace with their workmates, while so many people aren't. And I think that was a bit of a tipping point, because it was the first sort of, for me, the first real big them and us moment. There have been others, people were very divided about the way the players celebrated after Mark Sampson, just before Mark Sampson was sacked at that Russia game, and things like that, which obviously I was very, very disappointed with myself. But like there was division over that, and fans still backed their players and things. But whereas Dubai, it was everyone was angry. I don't think we've seen that quite so collectively across the board than with anything else.
Yeah.
And maybe it has emboldened people. Like I said, I think that's the way things were going anyway. But it's just I'm disappointed in the players, and I know people were frustrated with how much anger was directed at players to a certain extent, and how long it went on, and how frustrated people are. But I think that was magnified by lockdown, by the situation we're in, how hard we're all finding it. When we can't even leave our houses,
and the lack of accountability, I think, as well, Sue.
Exactly, yeah. And I guess the big thing for me was, I suppose this like, I had quite a bit of irritation at this idea that, oh, we're taking it too far and we're criticising them too much, because it was bad. It was really, really bad, and it doesn't mean that I don't expect the players should be able to take it, because it was bad, and they probably can all reflect on it. And like, I know some of those players. I've chatted to them. I've got some of their mobile numbers. Like, we've done fantastic interviews together. I've got a lot of respect for a lot of them. There's some that I really, really, really love as players, but I expect better from them as people, and I hope that they could take that collective outrage. So for people who were critical of the outrage, that irritated me a little bit, because these are we're allowed to expect more. Does that make sense? What I mean?
I get that, and I felt like there was a bit of a collective. We're not angry, we're just disappointed from everybody, and I do feel there was a gap where the clubs. For me, that's where my disappointment particularly was. I was disappointed with the actions of the players, but the club, that was an opportunity for the club to step in and kind of go, do you know what, we should have done. And only one or two, Casey Stoney, for example, one or two, I know you want to come in here, and actually kind of came out and said something, and that had a big impact actually for people to hear Casey Stoney go, do you know what, I hold my hands up, it was a bad decision. And that would have gone a long, long way. Sorry.
But I think this comes back to something we were sort of talking about earlier about criticism. Criticism is fine, like, definitely they deserve the criticism for that, but then when it turned onto the abusive side that they got as well, because there is, at the moment, you can't do criticism without having the abusive side on social media. It just doesn't happen. That's where it gets out of control. And I think all of us were very well within our rights to criticize. Everyone was in their rights to criticize, but when people then started to abuse the players because of it, for a decision that I think now they wouldn't make again.
Yes.
And if they do, well, there's problems. But it was I think it was a big error of judgment on many sides. But and the criticism was well due, but the abuse of that was not.
Yeah,
takes it too far.
I think we can agree on that. Like, regardless of what you do, that old saying of two wrongs don't make a right, just because someone's done wrong doesn't mean you can then go and verbally and personally abuse them in response to that. Anyway, well, I was right. It was a mildly controversial question. Molly, do you want to come in? I was just going to shout out Carly English for asking that and resulting in this little debate, but go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to kind of add to what you were all saying, for me, the tipping point wasn't the abuse or the criticism they got. The tipping point was the fact that so many people were talking about it, and that we were all writing about it, and that clubs were like, people care. Like, I wrote this in my column at the time. It was sort of you're professional players now. You have this platform. You've reaped the rewards of what we've all been working towards, this amazing game, and that means you have to act in the right way too. And I think
great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And I think that was the tipping point, that, again, should they have just apologized? Well, actually, now they have PR companies, they have agents, the clubs have to, brief us as journalists on what's going on, and they have to say, you can say this and you can't say this. And it's a whole new world to what it used to be, and we're used to that from the men's game, but a lot of people aren't used to that from the women's game. And I think, actually, from what I understand, some of the players were quite surprised at the kind of criticism that they got, and I think that is a mark of it's not a bad thing. The criticism wasn't bad. In my opinion, I certainly stand by everything that I wrote, and I feel like I didn't read anything overly critical of them, but it's just the way it is now, and actually probably for the players that's kind of hard to take, that for a very long time journalists certainly weren't looking at their social medias. They wasn't looking where they were going on holiday. Nobody really cared. Ironically, when lots of people write nobody really cares under our articles, newsflash, people really care. So yeah, for me that was the tipping point, not the actual abuse, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And we've got one more question before we finish, but Emma, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly jump in on that point that Molly said there about like us as journalists looking at players' social media. Just as an example of that being a good thing, was just before Christmas when Chelsea sent out food packages to their players over Christmas. All of the Chelsea players posted it on their Instagram. I saw that. I rang Chelsea and said, I love this. Can you give me some more information? And I wrote a short story on it. I think that's just an example of, and I know all you guys would have done that at some point as well, of where social media can be used, as a good thing, and how clubs and journalists can work together to put across a good story.
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that because I just thought that was a good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are gonna finish on a positive story. Don't worry, it's not all about. I'm so sorry if you can hear little footsteps this whole time through this conversation. It's because our rabbit is just running around our feet constantly and desperately trying to get up on the chair to be involved in this. He's been involved in so many work Zoom calls that I think he just assumes when there's a video chat, he's on.
He's always welcome.
I was just gonna add that maybe one good thing of Dubai Gate, if there is a good thing, is the fact that maybe players now realize that people do care. Like you were saying, Mole, like before, no one, maybe they'll think twice now because they realize that people actually really do care about them as role models and them as players and what they're doing and how they're behaving. So I think maybe the positive to take from that is hopefully from that players actually really realize, there's a lot of people out there who care enormously about this game and about them and about the way that women's football is developing and how big the game can get, and that sense of responsibility that they should have will now come on because they've realized that.
Yeah, because they're role models, and that kind of, you probably don't realize you're a role model until you do something wrong and a lot of people criticize you for it and you're like, oh wow, I actually do have quite an impact on my following. So yeah, that's a pretty good point. Last one is from Verena. She said, do you think there's still a way to avoid social media becoming as toxic in the men's game, and if so, what has to be done? I mean, if we knew the answer to that question, we'd be geniuses, but do you think we can still kind of maintain some sort of uniqueness in women's football? Susie, you're nodding. Do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I think we've all got a bit of a collective responsibility on it. Like things like this, where we call it out and we say, look, something is going awry here and it needs to be corrected. As a community, we can intervene on this and use our voices to say, look, something needs to change here. Frank Kirby saying it in my article, you guys putting your social media post out, which got huge traction and was shared and liked by loads of players as well as fans and journalists and everyone, like
managers as well.
That exactly, that all contributes to it. If we clamp down collectively on it before it becomes a serial problem, then we can stop it from developing. Obviously, as the game grows and the fan bases get bigger and more people are drawn into the game that aren't aware of the ethos and atmosphere that we would like to see and cultivate within the game, it's going to change. We're going to have to keep having those conversations, because I think one of you said it earlier that, football and women's football is a microcosm of society. It reflects everything, every good and bad thing of society within it, and social media amplifies often the more negative aspects of that, because I think it all comes down to reviews, isn't it? When people don't write good reviews, generally more people write bad reviews. That's what happens. You put out a CD and it will get more negative reviews from the public than it will get positive reviews from the public, because people don't feel care enough to go and say, yeah, this was really, really great. But they look, yeah, this was really, really crap. And that's what social media does, is it amplifies the worst. So it's hard, because as long as it exists within society generally, it's always going to exist within women's football.
Yeah.
But we can do our best to make it better. And I think there is a bit more of a collective consciousness that these past few months have been incredibly intense. Not just because of what's happened, Dubai's, all of that, but we're in a global pandemic, we're in lockdown, we've all got cabin fever and are losing our minds a little bit, and that's made it all a bit worse as well.
Yeah,
it's also given people time to reflect as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, we talked about this kind of between us, about how we've a lot less outlets for our emotions now. Like, there's so many ways that you probably didn't realize that you kind of released stress and tension and pent up kind of anger or whatever that might be throughout the day. And now that a lot of us don't have those kind of outlets anymore, the things that we're most passionate about, we become even more passionate about, because we have it back now and we desperately want it to stay. And you kind of end up then becoming a bit of, the boiling over a little bit, and whether that's kind of influenced the more negative side of social media. And a lot more of us are probably on social media because we have more time to be. And I'm just going to touch back on the fact that you said a CD. Like, I mean, when was the last time a CD?
I was thinking that as well. I'm glad that you picked up on that, because
I was immediately thinking in my head, there's probably some people watching who were like, what's a CD?
Molly is definitely
I've shown my age.
That's all right, don't worry. I think we could probably wrap this up now on actually quite a nice story and like a positive way that social media is being used, and that's Magda Eriksson and Pernille Harder using their Valentine's Day to open up their DMs, I think on both Instagram and Twitter, to people to talk about, obviously, for those who don't know, they're in a relationship, and they talked about the fact that they're very lucky to have that support from their families and their friends, and they've been together for a long time, and they basically opened up their DMs for people to reach out if they're struggling with coming out or looking for advice. And I thought that was an incredible way to use their platforms and to use the kind of influence that they have, and was a real example of role models. And I think we've got some really great role models in the women's game.
Absolutely. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah, it was brilliant. Well done, Pernille. Well done, Magda. Proper role models.
But I also think that's maybe also the beauty of the women's game as well, because we are an open, it's a pretty open game. A lot of people feel very included in it and accepted just by being part of the WOSO community. So like, I can't believe I just said that word.
Yeah,
I hate the words.
God.
But anyway, but being part of that, there's so many differences are sort of celebrated, and it's a very welcoming environment. And I think that's something that we really need to hang on to. And thankfully, it's remaining as the game grows. But I mean, it is a pretty special environment to be part of.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that's helped me a lot personally, because I wasn't like super open when we first got together, and I think this has definitely helped me be much more comfortable in myself and much more open about myself. So that's been a massive part of it. I think the one thing I'd like to avoid in the women's football kind of network, I suppose, is that when I think about writing something about the men's game on social media, half the time I'm like, no, I'm just not going to do that, because I'm just going to end up getting abuse and sexist abuse. I'm going to get this and going to get that. We want people to feel like they can come in and contribute and not be worried that they're going to get some sort of negative pile-on for an opinion about something. And I think that's the kind of thing we want to protect.
Yeah. It's sad, isn't it? Because social media is so hugely powerful. And in the men's game as well, it can be used for extreme good too. You look at what Marcus Rashford has done, and would he have had the same effect without being able to amplify his voice directly to the public using his social media channels? I think he still would have had an effect, because he probably would have used the media and stuff, but would it have even started in the first place if he hadn't tweeted about it or going to a food bank or whatever it may be? I don't think it would have had the same impact or like affected people in the same way. We get that in the women's game a lot. And Pernille and Magda doing what they did was just a little small part of that, and we're very lucky that we've got a lot of people willing to discuss the broader issues going on in society, mainly because plenty of the girls in the championship are working in the health service during a pandemic and things like that. They've still got links directly to these things, but we're really lucky that we've got all these fantastic, intelligent footballers that are very, very thoughtful about what's going on in the world. And yeah, we should celebrate that and be encouraging them to be more vocal on social media and use their voice and their platform for good, so that it's not just the one Marcus Rashford on the women's side speaking out, but that you get a much more broader spread of people doing it still.
Yeah, and maybe it's worth wrapping up on a point Molly made earlier, that something worth remembering is that more often than not, the minority shout the loudest, and more often than not, people are much more likely to say something negative than they are positive. And if you are unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of negative tweets or abuse, to try and remember that there's probably 10, 20 people out there who think what you're doing is really good. And it's trying to, keep that in mind. And it is easier said than done, because, we struggle as well with it, but it is maybe worth remembering that. And I guess reach out to people if you are struggling with stuff like that, with comments, with abuse, even if you just need to talk to someone and flag it with someone, just so you feel like you've got an outlet. Twitter is, and social media is, a great platform to build that community. So there is a lot of positive that can come out of it. So that, I think, is worth wrapping up on a note like that.